The personnel file slammed against the conference table. Julian Vance stood at the head of the room, holding it up like a trophy, his smile sharp enough to cut glass. Are we really paying this guy to look at codes? He let the words hang there, making sure every executive in that room heard him clearly. $600,000 a year to sit in an office and stare at spreadsheets. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward me. I kept my hands flat on the table, willing them not to shake. I have been here 4 weeks, Julian continued, pacing like a prosecutor making closing arguments. 4 weeks, and I can already identify the inefficiencies bleeding this company dry. This position, Senior Compliance Analyst, he said my title like it was a punchline. This is exactly the kind of bloated role that looks good on paper but delivers zero measurable value. I am Daniel Foster. I had spent 8 years at Summit Capital, catching the mistakes that would have buried this company. 8 years of reading contracts until my eyes burned, finding the clauses everyone else missed, flagging the deals that looked golden but were actually landmines. And Julian Vance, who had been here barely long enough to learn where the restrooms were, was reducing my entire career to looking at codes. Daniel here makes more than some of our department heads, Julian said, warming to his audience. Edward Miller, our chief financial officer, was watching carefully. Brenda Jenkins, my boss, looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. And what is his output? Reports nobody reads. Warnings about disasters that somehow never actually happen. Brenda tried to cut in. Julian, if you look at Daniel's actual track record over the past 8 years, Julian waved her off like she was a mosquito. I have reviewed the track record. Lots of activity, lots of busy work. What I do not see is concrete return on investment. What I do not see is a single catastrophe he has actually prevented. Because those catastrophes he is always warning about, they never materialize. Maybe because they were never real in the first place. That is when I snapped. I had been up since 4 that morning, finishing my analysis of the Pinnacle software acquisition. My daughter Lily had been sick with a fever for 4 days. My son Dylan needed help preparing for his debate tournament. My wife Sarah was holding our family together while I worked 12-hour days. And I was done being diplomatic. Section 12, subsection 4 of the Pinnacle software acquisition, I said. My voice cut through the room, steady and cold. The earn-out structure directly contradicts the indemnification language. If we close this deal tomorrow as planned, we are exposed to liability that could exceed $2.5 billion. Julian's grin got wider. $2.5 billion? Everyone hear that? $2.5 billion? Let me get this straight, Daniel. You are telling me that our legal team missed this problem? That the 3 advisory firms we paid millions to review this deal missed it? That Pinnacle's own attorneys missed it? But you, sitting in your office with your spreadsheets, you found the smoking gun nobody else could see. Yes, the single word landed like a challenge. Julian laughed, and a few people around the table shifted uncomfortably. Edward Miller leaned forward, interested despite himself. What is the specific exposure, Daniel? I pulled up my laptop, calling up the analysis I had sent to the deal team 3 times already. Pinnacle's revenue reporting methodology does not align with their actual contract structure. They are classifying one-time project fees as recurring subscription revenue to inflate their growth metrics. When we reconcile their books post-acquisition using standard accounting principles, their earn-out performance triggers will fail. The indemnification clause, as currently written, allows them to claim we deliberately sabotage their operations to avoid the earn-out payout. The earn-out is structured at $500 million over 4 years. Factor in consequential damages for lost shareholder value, and we are looking at $2.5 billion minimum. The room went silent for about 5 seconds. Then Julian shook his head, smiling like I was a child, insisting monsters lived in the closet. This is exactly the problem. Theoretical catastrophes, hypothetical scenarios built on assumptions. He turned to Edward. When does Pinnacle Software close? Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, and have their lawyers raised any red flags about the Section 12 issue? Edward glanced at me, then back at Julian. No, they have not. Right, because it is not actually a problem. It is Daniel finding patterns in the wallpaper. Julian closed my personnel file with a decisive snap. Here is what is happening. Pinnacle Software closes tomorrow as planned. This deal has been 6 months in the making, and we are not blowing it up because of theoretical concerns. He turned those cold eyes on me. And Daniel, you are taking some paid leave. 2 weeks effective immediately. Rest up. Think about whether this role is really the right fit for your talents. Paid leave. The words might as well have been that I was fired. We are just being polite about it. Everyone in that room knew the script. Paid leave, then a performance improvement plan, then a generous exit package and a non-disclosure agreement. Brenda tried one last time. Julian, I really think we should at least have Daniel present his full analysis. Meeting is over. Julian was already gathering his materials. Let us stay focused on what actually moves this company forward. I walked out of that conference room knowing 3 things with absolute certainty. First, my career at Summit Capital was finished. Second, Julian Vance was going to close the Pinnacle Software deal despite my warnings. And third, when that deal exploded exactly the way I had predicted, they were going to need someone to blame. I went back to my office and stared at the Pinnacle Software documents still glowing on my screen. All that conflicting language highlighted in yellow, the revenue discrepancies I had flagged in red, the mathematical certainty of disaster. Brenda appeared in my doorway 10 minutes later. She looked like she had aged 5 years in the past hour. I am so sorry, Daniel. You tried your best. I appreciate it. He has been building a case against you since his first week. High-cost position, difficult to quantify output on a spreadsheet. You were always going to be his first target. Brenda closed the door and sat down. What are you going to do? I was already opening a new email. I am going to document exactly what I found, exactly when I found it, and exactly what I recommended. Then I am going to send it to everyone who needs to see it. Will that help? It will create a paper trail. When this deal goes sideways, at least there will be proof I saw it coming. The email took me 3 hours to write. Every word mattered. I could not sound emotional. I could not sound like I was trying to sabotage the deal out of spite. I had to be clinical, factual, and professional. I referenced sections, risk analysis, dollar exposure calculations, and a timeline of when I had flagged these issues. My recommended action was simple. Delay closing by 48 hours and have independent counsel review the specific language conflicts. I sent it to Edward Miller, copied Julian Vance, Brenda Jenkins, and General Counsel Henry Albright. Then I sat there staring at the send confirmation, knowing it would not change anything. Julian's response came 25 minutes later, 2 sentences that would eventually cost him his career. Noted, closing proceeds as scheduled. I forwarded the entire email chain to my personal account. Then I forwarded every other email I had sent about Pinnacle Software over the past 6 weeks. Every warning, every analysis, every flag I had raised. 18 documents total, all time-stamped. All showing I had been screaming about this problem while everyone else covered their ears. My phone buzzed. Sarah was calling. How did it go? Her voice was hopeful. She knew I had been preparing for this meeting all week. I will tell you when I get home, I replied. Daniel, what happened? Paid leave for 2 weeks. He is setting up for termination. Silence on the other end then. I am so sorry. Come home. We will figure this out. But I could not sleep that night. I kept running through the Pinnacle Software documents in my mind, checking my math, questioning my analysis. What if I was wrong? What if this was the one time I had seen patterns that did not exist? Maybe that is why Julian saw me as expendable. Maybe I had become the analyst who cried wolf. At 3 in the morning, I was at the kitchen table with my laptop rechecking the revenue classification discrepancies for the 50th time. The numbers did not lie. Pinnacle Software was misrepresenting their financials. The earnout was going to fail. The indemnification language was going to crush Summit Capital. Sarah found me there, eyes red from staring at the screen. You have checked this how many times? I do not know. A lot. And every single time, what did you find? The same problem. She pulled up a chair next to me. Then you did your job. You warned them. You documented it. Whatever happens now, that is on them, not you. But it did not feel that way. When you are good at what you do, the responsibility does not end just because someone else makes the final call. The next morning, I did not go into the office. My forced leave had started, which meant I was not supposed to check my work email. I checked it anyway. At 7:45, I started refreshing my inbox. At 8:17, the company-wide announcement hit. Summit Capital is pleased to announce the successful closing of our acquisition of Pinnacle Software. This transformative deal positions us at the forefront of data analytics and financial technology integration. The deal was done. The countdown had started. Sarah made breakfast. Dylan asked why I was home on a weekday. Lily wanted me to read a story to my daughter. I went through the motions, but my mind was calculating timelines. It would take at least 3 weeks for Summit's finance team to start the serious integration work. Another week or two before they would try to reconcile Pinnacle's revenue reporting. Maybe a month before the discrepancies became undeniable. Maybe 2 months before Pinnacle's lawyers started making noise about the earnout. I had time. Time to update my resume. Time to start looking for my next position. Time to pretend this was not eating me alive. By day 3 of my forced leave, I had made my decision. I called Brenda at 9 in the morning. I am resigning. Dead silence. Then, Daniel, no, do not do anything rash. You are on paid leave. You are still getting your salary. Just write it out and we will figure out what comes next. I know what comes next, Brenda. Julian fires me and controls the narrative. He makes it look like I was terminated for cause, for being difficult, for not being a team player. I become the analyst who could not adapt to new leadership. He is going to fire me anyway, Brenda. You know it. This way I leave on my terms with my resignation letter saying exactly what I want it to say. What about your salary, your benefits? Daniel, you have got 2 kids and a mortgage. I have also got documentation that I warned this company about a multi-billion-dollar disaster and was completely ignored. When Pinnacle Software blows up, that documentation is worth more than 2 weeks of salary. Brenda was quiet. You are sure about this? I have never been more sure of anything. I wrote the resignation email that afternoon. It took me an hour to get the tone right. Professional, cordial, brief, and effective immediately. I am resigning from my position as Senior Compliance Analyst. Thank you for the opportunities over the past 8 years. I wish Summit Capital continued success. I sent it to Human Resources, copied Brenda and Edward Miller. I deliberately did not copy Julian. Let him find out through the grapevine. Let him think he had won. Then I did something I had never done before. I called an employment lawyer. Her name was Claire Higgins, and she came highly recommended. I got her assistant first, explained I needed urgent consultation. Somehow they fit me in for a call at 3 that afternoon. Tell me everything, Claire said. When we connected, I walked her through the whole story. The Pinnacle Software acquisition, the clause conflict I had identified, the revenue reporting discrepancies, Julian's dismissal of my warnings, the forced paid leave, and my resignation that morning. When I finished, Claire was quiet for maybe 10 seconds. Do you have documentation of your warnings? She asked. I have every email, every analysis, every risk assessment, all time-stamped, all sent to the appropriate people and their responses. Julian's response to my final warning was 2 sentences, noted. Closing proceeds as scheduled. I heard her exhale over the line. Daniel, you just made the smartest decision of your career by resigning. If this situation develops the way you think it will, Summit Capital is going to be desperate to assign blame. As a current employee, you would be vulnerable to internal investigations and a framed firing. As a former employee with bulletproof documentation that you identified and properly escalated the risk, you are protected. More than that, you are valuable. Valuable how? I asked. When the disaster hits, they are going to need your expertise to dig themselves out. Under California Labor Code Section 1102.5, you engaged in protected whistleblower activity when you reported potential financial misrepresentations. When Julian Vance retaliated by placing you on forced leave, that was a clear adverse action. And under California common law established in Turner v. Anheuser-Busch, their behavior constitutes constructive discharge, meaning they legally forced you to resign. You have the grounds for a massive wrongful termination and whistleblower lawsuit. If we file that, it becomes public record, alerting the Securities and Exchange Commission to the accounting discrepancies Julian tried to hide. That would completely destroy Summit's defense against Pinnacle and expose the board to shareholder lawsuits. When they come calling, we are going to make sure you are properly compensated, completely indemnified from any liability, and that the truth is put on the record. Are you sure your analysis is correct? I thought about those numbers, those clauses, that mathematical certainty. Yes, I am not wrong. Then we prepare, Claire said. Forward me every document you have. We are going to build a file that makes it crystal clear you did everything right. I spent the next 5 hours forwarding documents to Claire. When I was done, I had a folder with 30 files. A complete paper trail of competence ignored. Claire called me back that evening. This is excellent documentation. You have protected yourself beautifully. Now we wait. Sarah was not entirely on board with my resignation at first. We needed that income. I know, but I could not sit there on forced leave waiting for the axe to fall. I will find something else. The market is good for senior compliance analyst right now. I had already had 2 recruiters reach out. She pulled me close. I trust you. I just do not want these people to hurt you any more than they already have. Too late for that, I said. But I can control what happens next. The first week after my resignation was surreal. I actually showed up to Dylan's debate practice. I took Lily to a doctor's appointment. I cooked dinner every night. Sarah kept saying I seemed lighter, less stressed, but underneath everything I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Brenda called me on day 11 after my resignation. How are you holding up? She asked. Better than expected. Sleeping more. Actually seeing my kids. How is everything there? Tense, Brenda admitted. Julian is on a rampage. He eliminated 4 more positions this week, all high salary roles. He is making a name for himself as the guy who cuts costs. She paused. He has not mentioned your resignation once. It is like you never existed. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. 8 years of work erased in 4 weeks by a new executive with something to prove. Has anything come up with the Pinnacle software integration? I asked. Daniel, you do not work here anymore. You really should not be thinking about this. Brenda, please. She sighed. Integration starts next week. Finance is beginning the preliminary reconciliation work. Everything looks fine so far, but it is early. The bomb was still ticking. I updated my resume that week. I talked to 3 different recruiters. The response was positive. Senior compliance analysts with your track record are in massive demand right now, one told me. You could command $900,000 at the right firm. I had interviews lined up with 2 different firms. Both seemed promising. I did not mention that my most recent attempt at preventing disaster had gotten me pushed out of a conference room. On the Saturday that marked exactly 3 weeks since the Pinnacle software closing, my phone rang at 8 in the morning. It was Brenda. Her voice was shaking so badly, I almost could not understand her words. Daniel, oh my God, you were right. You were completely right about everything. My heart started pounding. I walked out of the kitchen where Sarah was making breakfast. Tell me what happened, I said. Pinnacle's quarterly financial reports came in yesterday. The revenue recognition issue you flagged is catastrophic. They have been systematically misclassifying contract revenue for 18 months. One-time project fees categorized as recurring subscriptions. When our finance team started applying standard accounting practices for the integration, nothing reconciled. We are talking about hundreds of millions in revenue that does not actually exist. I sat down on the couch, my legs suddenly weak. What about the earn-out clause? Brenda's voice dropped. Their lawyers sent a formal demand letter this morning. They are claiming we deliberately interfered with their operations, which caused the revenue discrepancies to surface and destroyed their earn-out value. They are citing the exact indemnification language you referenced. Daniel, they are demanding $2,600,000,000 in damages. $2,600,000,000. This was the nightmare scenario I had warned them would happen. The disaster everyone had ignored. Where is Julian right now? Emergency board meeting started at 6 this morning, Brenda said. Edward Miller is in there. Henry Albright from the legal department. Everyone is trying to figure out how this happened. Has my name come up? Brenda hesitated. Edward asked if anyone had flagged concerns. Julian tried to downplay it. Said you were always finding theoretical problems. But Edward pushed back. He remembered your email. He asked to see the documentation. There is plenty of documentation, I said. I know, Daniel. Listen to me. Julian is going to try to spin this. He is going to try to make it seem like your warnings were vague. You need to be ready. I called Claire immediately. She answered on the second ring, even though it was Saturday morning. It happened, I said. Pinnacle, everything I predicted. They are claiming $2,600,000,000. Send me any communications you receive from Summit Capital, Claire instructed. Do not respond to anything without my explicit approval. By Monday morning, my personal inbox was flooded with urgent messages. Edward Miller was trying to reach me, and Henry Albright from the legal department kept emailing to schedule an immediate call. Someone from Human Resources with a vague subject line about consulting opportunities. Even Julian sent an email. Need to discuss Pinnacle software matter, urgently. I forwarded every single message to Claire and did not respond to any of them. Tuesday afternoon, Claire called with an update. I just spent 60 minutes on the phone with Henry Albright. Summit Capital wants to bring you back. As what? I asked. A scapegoat? As a consultant, Claire said. They need your expertise to build their defense against Pinnacle's claim. You know the deal structure better than anyone. You identified the issues before closing. You understand the revenue discrepancies. They need you to walk their legal team through everything. The irony was almost funny. 4 weeks ago, Julian was mocking my salary and pushing me out. Now they are desperate. The board is asking pointed questions about the decision-making process. Why did this deal close despite identified risks? Who made that final call? Julian is feeling serious heat from above. Before we even consider you helping them, we need terms that protect you completely and make your role in this situation absolutely clear. What kind of terms? I asked. Full indemnification from any liability related to Pinnacle software. An independent consulting rate that reflects your actual value. I am thinking $20,000 per day, and most importantly, any official response to Pinnacle's claim must include a detailed timeline, establishing that you identified these risks, properly escalated your concerns, and were overruled. You are not the person who caused this disaster. You are the person who tried to prevent it. That needs to be documented in writing and included in their legal filings. If they refuse, we file our administrative complaint for whistleblower retaliation under California Labor Code. Section 1102.5 and constructive discharge under the Turner precedent. That will make the board's negligence public immediately. They agreed to everything within 48 hours. They had no choice. They were staring down a $2,600,000,000 claim, and I was the only person who understood the problem. I walked back into Summit Capital's offices on a Thursday morning, exactly 4 weeks after Julian Vance had laughed at my salary and questioned my value. The atmosphere was completely different from my last day in that building. It was quiet, tense, and thick with fear. Everyone knew about the Pinnacle claim by now. Henry Albright met me in the lobby personally. He was mid-50, with gray hair and deep circles under his eyes. Daniel, thank you for agreeing to help us. Where do we start? The conference room, I said. I want the full deal team assembled, plus outside counsel from Davis & Cole. We need you to walk everyone through your analysis. The conference room was packed. Edward Miller looking exhausted, Brenda giving me a small, grateful smile, 3 lawyers from Davis & Cole in expensive suits, and Julian Vance sitting at the far end of the table staring at his notepad. Henry opened the meeting with practiced efficiency. Everyone here understands our situation. Pinnacle Software is alleging that Summit Capital deliberately interfered with their post-acquisition operations, causing their earn-out performance metrics to fail. They are claiming $2,600,000,000 in damages under the indemnification clause. We have 90 days to file our response. He gestured toward me. Daniel Foster identified significant issues with the earn-out structure and indemnification language prior to closing. We need to understand exactly what he found, when he found it, and how that information was communicated. Every eye in the room turned to me. Julian still would not look up from his notepad. I opened my laptop and pulled up the analysis I had prepared. I will start with the complete timeline, I said. For the next 3.5 hours, I walked them through everything with surgical precision. The initial contract review, where I had first noticed the problematic language in Section 12, the deep dive into Pinnacle's historical financial filings that revealed inconsistencies in their revenue recognition methodology, the conflicting structure between earn-out performance triggers and indemnification liability allocation. I detailed the 3 separate emails I had sent to the deal, team flagging these concerns, the risk assessment presentation I delivered, and finally, my last comprehensive email sent 18 hours before closing, laying out the potential exposure in exact detail. One of the outside lawyers, a sharp-eyed partner named Roxanne Ellis, stopped me. "This final email you sent the day before closing. Who received it and who responded?" I sent it to Edward Miller, copied Julian Vance, Brenda Jenkins, and Henry Albright. Julian Vance responded. Roxanne turned her attention to Julian. "Mr. Vance, what was the nature of your response?" Julian's voice was flat, stripped of all the confidence he had displayed 4 weeks ago. "I acknowledged receipt of Daniel's concerns and made the determination that closing should proceed as scheduled." Roxanne turned back to me. "Daniel, in your professional opinion, based on 8 years of compliance analysis, was the risk you identified discoverable during standard due diligence?" I looked directly at Julian. He still would not meet my eyes. "Yes, it required detailed cross-referencing of contract language with actual revenue reporting methodology. But it was absolutely discoverable. And in your professional opinion, should this acquisition have closed with the identified language conflicts in place?" "No, the risk exposure was too significant. At minimum, closing should have been delayed until the conflicting language could be reconciled." "Thank you, Daniel." The meeting ended, but the critical narrative had been established. I had done my job. The decision to override those warnings sat entirely with Julian Vance. Over the following 12 weeks, I worked closely with Roxanne and the Davis & Cole legal team to construct a defense strategy. The core argument was elegantly simple. Pinnacle Software had misrepresented their financial position from the very beginning. The earnout failure was the inevitable result of Pinnacle's pre-acquisition financials, being built on aggressive accounting practices that could not survive standard reconciliation. To prove that thesis, we had to reconstruct Pinnacle's revenue history. I spent weeks analyzing every contract they had executed over the past 4 years. The deeper I dug, the worse it looked. They had been systematically aggressive, deliberately reclassifying revenue types to create the appearance of growth. One-time project fees became subscription revenue. Implementation charges became ongoing services. When Summit's finance team began applying generally accepted accounting practices during integration, the house of cards collapsed. The real numbers told a completely different story. Pinnacle was worth perhaps 75% of what Summit had paid. Roxanne used my analysis to flip the narrative. Summit Capital was not the party in breach. Pinnacle was. They had committed fraud in the inducement by misrepresenting their financial performance. When faced with our substantial counterclaim, Pinnacle reached out to settle. Within 3 months, the agreement was finalized. Pinnacle completely withdrew their $2.6 billion claim, and Summit Capital agreed to a restructured earnout with lower targets. Summit Capital survived, barely. Julian Vance's resignation was announced shortly after. The carefully worded board statement mentioned pursuing other opportunities. Everyone who could read between corporate lines knew exactly what had happened. Edward Miller called me into his office the morning after Julian's resignation became public. "We want you to come back permanently," he said. "Senior Vice President of Risk Management and Compliance. You would have oversight authority for all major deal analysis. Direct reporting line to me and the board. $1,500,000 salary, plus a substantial equity stake." It was validation that my expertise mattered. I thought about the offer for maybe 15 seconds. "No, but thank you," I said. Edward looked shocked. "Daniel, this is a significant opportunity. I appreciate that, but I have already accepted a position elsewhere." Ironclad Advisors had contacted me back in January. They were a boutique consulting firm, specializing in acquisition risk assessment. They had heard about my role in the Pinnacle Software situation. They wanted me to do exactly what I had just done for Summit, but for multiple clients across different industries on my own terms. The base salary was actually lower than Summit's offer, $700,000. But the equity stake was substantial and the partnership track was clear. More importantly, I would never have to sit through another meeting where someone like Julian Vance dismissed my expertise as theoretical concerns. My final day as a Summit Capital consultant was a Friday. Brenda took me to lunch. "You are really leaving us," she said. "I am," I replied. "We are going to miss you." "I am going to miss you too, Brenda. You could come with me. Ironclad Advisors is expanding rapidly." Brenda smiled but shook her head. "Maybe eventually. Let me see how things evolve here with new leadership." That night, Sarah opened a good bottle of wine after Dylan and Lily were asleep. "To my brilliant husband, who saved a company that did not deserve him." "I did not save them," I said. "I just did the job they should have let me do in the first place." "You did more than that," Sarah said. "You stood your ground when everyone said you were wrong. You protected yourself when they would have made you a scapegoat. You came through this stronger and on your own terms." We touched glasses and drank. The truth was I felt tired, relieved, but also vindicated. Sometimes being right is not enough. You also have to be brave enough to speak up, document everything, and protect yourself when others refuse to listen. I had done all of that, and I would do it again tomorrow because that is what real expertise looks like. Having the courage to speak the truth and stand by it. That is the lesson Julian Vance learned too late. And it is the story of how a $600,000 salary almost cost a company $2,500,000,000. 6 months into my role at Ironclad Advisors, I received a message from Edward Miller, who had also left Summit Capital. His message was short. "I should have listened to you in that conference room, and I am genuinely sorry I did not. What you did took real courage." I wrote back, "You listen when it actually mattered, and that is what counts. Speak up, stand by your work, document everything, and trust that eventually the truth does win."